Great to have you with us, guys. And we're going to start with Jan. With limited knowledge of the industry, Jan and his business partner set up their small herb growing business in Victoria only 4.5 years ago, Australian fresh leaf herbs. In this short time, Jan has expanded Australian fresh leaf herbs from one basil crop to more than 100,000 bunches of various herbs delivered to more than 400 retailers a week. He was named Australia's Young Farmer of the Year 2011, doesn't look like a farmer, for his commitment to innovation in the local agricultural industry. Talk about raising the profile of farming across Australia. So it's a great story. There's a lot of things I haven't told you about him, but I'll leave that for him to tell in his story. Put your hands together for Jan Vidra. Thank you, Jan.
Firstly, thanks a lot for having me here. It's just an unbelievable turnout. I go to a few of these events and this is by far the biggest. So herbs. One question I always get asked is, why herbs? I'm not a farmer by trade. Mum and Dad weren't farmers. Mum's a physiotherapist and Dad's a panel beater. So I don't know where I got this herb things from. And the second question I always get asked is it legal? In every conversation I have. Every conversation. So to answer the first question, the second question I'll leave to your own imagination. It came from a customer. Back in 2006, I was working for a company called Yarra Valley Farms. Yarra Valley Farms specialised in delivery of fresh fruit and vegetables to cafes, restaurants and chefs. And I had all meetings every week with our franchise distributors in every state. And I was looking at how I can grow their business. And I found that in one meeting, one of my franchisees came up to me and said, "Look, Jan, we've got really bad herb supply. And the chefs are really complaining." And I said, "Herbs? It makes up 1% of our total revenue. Why is it so important?" So I listened and I went out and spoke to the chefs out there that were complaining. And they said, "Jan, herbs are our signature dish. You know, we put that's our last touch. It's what defines us as the job that we do. You know, we can get a bag of potatoes anywhere, but we can't get a consistent bunch of herbs. One day I get a bunch of herbs that's 10 grams and it's costing me 60 cents. The next day it's 400 grams and it's broken down, etc., etc." So I said, well, if I go into this industry and I give you a consistent product, would you do business with me? And they said, yeah, we'd love to do business with you. So what I did was I looked at the industry and what I found was a highly fragmented supply base. Everyone was growing herbs, big growers, small growers, more as a sideline and then supplying a central market. So I said, well, you know, I'm just going to hand all my business cards out. I'm going to find as many growers as I can. I'm going to get them to supply me. I'm going to QA and grade the product and supply it to the retailers and supply it to the chefs at that point and see what happens. And basically, after I handed out all my business cards, I got a call about 3 months later from one grower, and he said, "Jan, I've got all this parsley. My crazy wife grew all this parsley, and I don't know what to do with it." So I said, "I'll just take the lot." And I wrote a cheque for $10,000 and bought all this parsley. And I spent the rest of the day trying to figure out what I was going to do with it. I thought about calling my mum and thought make some tabbouleh, have a big party. I had no idea what to do. But luck has it that I sold all that parsley within 3 days and tripled my money, and I said, this is not a bad industry. And that's sort of how I got into the industry, and that's the story about how I got into herbs. So what I did was I travelled all around Australia and I met all these growers and I started consolidating in a central little warehouse that my friend lent me, and then basically supplying chefs all around Australia. And it came to a point where I go, well, now I've got 40... what did I do? I've got 50 suppliers all around Australia, and I really wanted to go further than that, and I wanted to get a farm. So through one of my suppliers, I met this gentleman, William, who was an ex-banker and also a balloon salesman, and then became a farmer. So I've gone, okay, why don't we go into business? Together we worked. The most important thing was we weren't farmers, we had no idea what we were doing, but we had the right alignment. We wanted to head in a direction where we wanted to create a branded product and be identified as the leaders in the industry, and we'll just learn. And we learnt. We learned from all our supplying growers who we support and grow with, and we opened our farm in April 2008, and it was really tough. You know, I tell you, that winter, we grew basil through the middle of winter, which now I know it doesn't grow in winter because it's too cold. But so we weathered that, and we built all these new big greenhouses and new ways to grow, and then spring came around, and you know what, things started to grow. You know, herbs need warmth, so great. So we got all this crop, and then I started thinking, well, how are we going to market this? And I said, well, let's establish a brand. Just to tell you one thing about my industry, right? Growers grow, they send to a centralised market, and then they get given a price for their product. And I've gone, this isn't right. I'm not going to grow and then hope that I'm going to get paid a good price for something. I'm going to develop a brand, and I call this my Coca-Cola strategy. I think forward all the way to the consumer and then reason back through the supply chain and go, well, what does the consumer want? And then what does the retailer want? And then how do I make the distributor more profitable? So my reason for launching a brand, Garnish Flavours, was basically to uncommoditise our product and control and start to control the supply chain through the independent retailers. The second thing that drove me developing a brand was all around the GFC. Believe it or not, we were supplying these chefs, and it was busy, but there was a shift when the GFC set in. I saw that people weren't going out as much, and I thought, what are they going to do? And believe it or not, I was in Coles shopping, and I saw an argument between a lady and her daughter about lamb shanks and how they should cook them. And I'm just sitting there and I've gone, I like lamb shanks, I like this discussion, where's it going? And then it twigged, I said, well, consumers are going to go home and they're going to cook. They're going to continue to eat well, but they're just going to do it at home. And then I went home and watched Callum win MasterChef, and I've gone, that's it, we're moving straight into retail, and we developed a retail brand. I want to talk about one quick dilemma that I found. So we developed this brand, and then I wanted to get it to market. I got all these distributors on, and I said, look, here's my beautiful products, and they're nice and branded, and they're barcoded, etc., which was a big thing for the industry because a lot of people didn't have barcoded products. And you know, I launched into this distributor venture, and it didn't go anywhere. It's like, well, the sales aren't increasing. What do we do? So I went out to the retailer, and one of the retailers that one of the distributors supplied, and I had a look at their product, and I looked at the product, and I've gone, I didn't grow that. It's in my packaging, but it's sure not my herb. It was damaged. It was bruised. So I started to rationalise backwards, and I go, all right, let's have a look at what these distributors are doing. And I looked at my product, which is very fine, and then I looked at the boxes that they were moving. And it was like a light bulb moment. It was, well, these guys are really good at moving boxes. The minute that you try to get them to pick and pack little herbs, they destroy the product. So I did something very simple, and what I did was I got the retailers to order directly from us. Then we consolidated the order specifically for that retailer, gave it to a distributor, and then the supply chain was supported. So what in essence happened is the retailer was getting a good product, which means the consumer started to identify a brand as a high quality product. At the distributor level, they weren't 20% of costs were knocked off because they weren't picking and packing any little finite products. So they were really happy. And we grew by 30% in the following week, and just kept compounding, and more distributors wanted to deal with us because we had this system in place to manage it. So where we went from there, I'm just going to skip forward, we started to look at process. So all this stuff was happening in our business. We were picking, packing, we were producing products, we were raising invoices, purchase orders, similar to any business, and we were using these kind of products. So we were using Access, Excel, MyOb, and the biggest problem that I had was there was all this activity going around, but it wasn't connecting. And that's what our office looked like. That guy just retired last week. So basically, I wanted to find a way to connect everything and simplify all our business process. So before that, I went to market, spoke to all these software engineers, spoke to all these experts, and no one could give me a simple interface that I could hand to a warehouse guy and go, just go and pack the order, or just go and receive the goods. So what I did was I documented all our processes, and I developed a brief, and I developed a central base of logic for our business where we can log in on an internet portal like this, and the suppliers can log in, the customers can log in, the operations can log in, they can pick and pack wirelessly. We got rid of paper completely, and basically run the business. So there's a few examples here. So there's Anna. She's producing a product on an iPad, and basically the orders come in live, and she's basically just filling the manufacturing line, and then she's telling her staff to do some things. And there's Ron, and Ron's receiving an order. So I started to get these wild ideas that I could maybe eliminate our administration. It's crazy. So when we receive a good from our suppliers, we raise a purchase order, we receive a good on an iPad, instantly the supplier gets a message saying, hey, thanks, John, we've received your basil, thanks for supplying. So I got this idea and I said, well, why don't they just process the bloody invoice? So I put a link on that email and they clicked on straight into the portal and processed their invoice. 80% of our suppliers now process their own invoices. 70% of our customers order online. And the system just basically knocks out 3 administrative people. It's cut our expenses down by about $100,000. And granted, it cost me $70,000 to implement it and develop it, and I've spent another $400 on developing it into a commercial product. But it's really saved us a lot of time and energy, and it's just been a gift to our business. So for the future, Fresh Leaf is looking at exporting at the moment. Believe it or not, we're looking at exporting to the UK. It's far, and everyone says I'm crazy, but I always analyse the political pressures that are going on, and also the weather and things like that. And there's an opportunity there. We're also looking at licensing our business systems to places in Southeast Asia, so they can grow herbs in the way that we've grown them and procure them to the major supermarkets because they've got a big QA issue there. We're currently investing 30% on average into development of our farms and our production base. We took that whole software concept and we've now incorporated it into a separate business that we're commercialising so we can empower SMEs to make decisions around this new digital revolution that's dawning on us. And that's it. That's me. Thanks.
Great story, Jan, from Fresh Leaf. You try to grow basil in winter and it doesn't grow, right?
No.
Yeah. So you end up with a whole bunch of basil and it's all crook. No, it's all wrong, right?
That's right.
That'd make it basil faulty, would it? My daughters would accuse me of that being one of the worst dad jokes.
Dad joke, definitely. It's a dad joke.
I couldn't help it. Okay, moving right along. Our next speaker is the 2007 Prime Minister's Environmentalist of the Year award winner, Aaron Wood. Aaron's commitment to the environment sees him as Director of Firestarter, an environmental communication and education consultancy business. Aaron also established the International River Health Conference for students from around the world, attracting over $18 million in funding, which has seen 15,000 students participate in the program. Aaron has overcome many hurdles but has managed to turn his passion into his life's work. Once again, I've got a lot more details about Aaron, but I'm going to let him tell his own story. So welcome to the microphone, Aaron.
Thanks, Alistair. Cheers, mate. Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. Dad jokes. I love dad jokes. I always say, you hear that introduction, you think, I've made the most of my opportunities. But I can tell you, growing up in primary school, my father was my primary school principal, and I spent more time in his office than any other child. He now works for me on minimum wage at Kids Teaching Kids, though, so I've had the last laugh there. He does say to me, he says, Aaron, if you're not nice to me, if you don't give me my lunch break, I can go to a much higher power than you, and that's my mum, so I've got to be a little bit careful. But we were lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to win the Telstra News Limited Micro Business of the Year award for Victoria, so thank you very much. And for me, being a small business owner, and you don't get much time to actually sort of step out of the day-to-day running of your business and really take a bit of inspiration from others. So I want to talk a bit about what I learnt from mixing with those businesses, those elite businesses. And I want to talk a little bit about that as a leadership role, and also how we can lead through inspiration. We talk about leaders sort of being the people who stand up the front of the room, or perhaps they're on television, or perhaps they're, our politicians or whoever that may be. But each and every day we actually have a leadership role that we can play. And small business, one thing that I learned going through that Telstra Business Awards process is the absolute backbone of Australia. We employ so many millions of people. We're so much of GDP. We're something like about 50 or 60% of GDP. So we talk about the focus on the mining boom, and that's well and good, and we've had some very big wins out of that. But when booms come and go, and Melbourne actually did pretty well out of something called a gold rush, but we don't earn our money out of gold anymore unless you're coming up to a proposal, which I did in March this year, and that's I helped that gold rush. But we've got to think about what happens there. That in Melbourne we now have tourism, and we have all these great industries and hospitality. That gold rush has come and gone. So it's about what happens with the ongoing core sustainability of our business sector. I turned Firestarter into a $2 million annual turnover business, and I was told it was a charity space. And I want to talk a little bit about the decision as to why I wanted to make this a for-profit company. Some of those reasons were that I thought that having to abide by the discipline of business would have been good for what we did. And we actually return more in the dollar than most charities do to the kids that we work with in Kids Teaching Kids. We've now had 55,000 kids through that program, and we've just ticked over to $25 million raised for that program. And what we learnt was how to talk to the corporate sector. So we've got companies like Australia Post and Melbourne Water and City Power Powercore and some of our biggest corporates supporting what we do. When I first came into the space 13 years ago after leaving the state government, working as a waterway manager, most of the charities were doing very good work, but they found it very difficult to speak the language of corporates and corporate social responsibility and linking things to HR outcomes and even entering marketing departments and making a pitch to these corporates was something that was quite foreign to them. So that's something we set about changing. So I want to give you, and I'm going to try and do this in 10 minutes, my 10 business lessons I've learned over the last 13 years, and I'm going to give you the secret to the entire universe. So that's, it's probably a good thing that you came along to the business breakfast this morning. So my first lesson that I learnt was that you have to have vision, but you also have to be aware of the macro issues that can impact on your business. So we mentioned Kodak before. It's an example of a business which started so well and just kept on doing the same thing and thinking that they were going to be here forever. It can have really dire consequences. One of those biggest macro issues, and see if you can work out when this quote's from, we should be using nature's inexhaustible source of energy, the sun, wind and tide. I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. That wasn't last week in Parliament, that was Thomas Edison in 1931. So the idea that sustainability, is a new thing is completely incorrect. And again, if we're not sort of heeding those calls in Australia, and this is not coal versus alternative energy, this is saying what is the right business decision. And so it's not saying let's get rid of coal, it's saying let's give more credence to alternative energy as a future business prospect for Australia. We've got the highest solar resource in the world, and it's certainly something that we can develop as a business, and it's something that we've done with Firestarter in educating our kids about those opportunities. In the background, we've got China and California staking their claim on the solar industry. We've got Asia moving very solidly forward in electric vehicle manufacture. We've got Europe leading the globe in wind generation technologies. Japan has now said that they want 10 million solar-powered homes by 2020. And Denmark is aiming for 100% solar powered by 2050. So the world is changing. Dare I mention the word carbon tax and a price on carbon? You'll have some great dinner conversations if you mention that word as an environmentalist, I can tell you. But whether you believe in it or not, whether you disagree with it, the global economy is changing. So you can either keep railing against it or you can see that trend that's going on and start to prepare for it. And I use GE as a big example of that. They've priced carbon into their operations since 2007. And they're using it to drive green innovation, so particularly in the alternative energy sector. So being aware of those macro issues is extremely important. The other thing that I learnt fairly early on is that you must have a passion for what you do, and I think in small business that's something that we live on in some weeks. Fear neither motivates people long term nor brings out the best in them. I've never raised my voice at any of my employees. I go for a walk around the block sometimes, but I've never raised my voice at them. There's better ways to bring out the best in them. And it really is that positivity of leadership, and I talk about that leadership role that determines whether your staff keep on meeting those challenges you set for them. As I said, at the Telstra Business Awards, in the 28 finalists that were there across 4 categories, startup, micro, small and medium, they were from different sectors, from agriculture to hospitality to online bike shops to engineering companies to vets, different turnovers, different types of businesses, different staff numbers, different structures, but they had one thing in common. When you spoke to every one of them, they were optimistic about the future of their sector. Whereas if you go and look at business confidence at the moment in Australia, and despite how well we're performing in a global sense, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. It doesn't take you long to find someone who says that we're going to hell in a handbasket. But again, being in that Telstra Business Awards, there was quite the opposite view. So important to be optimistic about the future and meet those challenges. Be prepared to take risks and keep on making mistakes and allow your staff to make mistakes as well. Jan talked about his basil faulty crop, and I sold my car to start my business and had no entrepreneurs in the family and had no idea how to run a business. I was an environmental scientist, and I can tell you I made so many mistakes in those early years. But they've set me up to run a very lean, a very profitable business in a charitable space now. And I think those early hiccups are why we keep on riding out some of these more difficult years, the GFC included. I think, Mum and Dad would have been quite happy with me staying working for the state government, collecting my holiday pay and doing all that kind of thing. But sometimes taking those risks brings out the great things. Get the best team around you. If you don't have a business relationship manager at your business bank who bends over backwards for your business, find another relationship manager. Even as a micro business, you should be accorded a business manager, a business banking manager who knows your business and supports what you do. The other thing that I learned is that just judging people on the money you have to pay them, example is the best person might cost you $70,000, but you can get someone for $50,000. And in the early days, we went for the $50,000 option because of our cash flow. But really now we've learned to see that $20,000 difference as an investment in the future of your business. And that just becomes more and more apparent, particularly in a small team. You can't carry anyone, so really select the best people you can get. And then the other thing that we learnt was how to compete with people who could offer higher wages was we gave greater staff flexibility. So I've got one staff member who's doing a part-time teaching degree. We give her time off without pay for those extra weeks, but then we also support the cost of doing that degree. We've got another staff member who volunteers in Indonesia. We give her the same sort of time off to do that as well. And those sorts of things keep those valued staff members as part of our team. Keep on upskilling when you get the chance. High commodity prices, high Australian dollar, can't compete with lower wages and conditions. What we do need to do in Australia is stay at the best practice of everything we do. And that's the only way we can compete. Education is a really important tool for that, and I keep on grabbing every opportunity I can. It allows you to be adaptable, it allows you to be nimble, it allows you to change direction and not go down the line that Kodak did. Make sustainability your core business. Again, seeing the environment just as something to save the world is dismissing the opportunities through saving water, saving energy, reducing waste in every business stream. You look at the global carpet company Interface, they've shaved $300 million a year off their bottom line through what they call Mount Sustainability. They're Americans, they need to have these wonderful terms. But what they've done with their business is effectively turn it around through making sustainability core business. Have a strong online presence. I think Jan, he gave you a very good example of that. Don't just have your website be a static brochure. But on the flip side of that, I've seen so many businesses then think that, all this social networking, this online presence is going to save their business. It's a tool just like any other business tool. So make sure you see it as a tool and you integrate that with the rest of your business. Understand your customers. Again, talking about some of our customers, Microsoft, Siemens, Australia Post, we needed to understand what they wanted out of the environmental space, where their corporate social responsibility lay, how HR could integrate their team members better into their own structure through volunteering and things like that. One that I think that many of us in this room would know is that your brand is your business and your name is your business. Don't ever trade that credibility for short-term gain. I'm seeing it a lot in the solar energy market at the moment. I do a weekly spot on 3AW. It's our number one radio station. Dennis Walters 145 on Wednesdays. And one of the things that I get from that is we get talk back, and what people want to know is who is the trusted brand that I should go with. And so what you're seeing very quickly in that emerging market is the people that are doing credible business, that are looking after their customers first, are the ones that are going to prevail. And the last lesson that I learned before I give you the secret to the entire universe is to look after yourself. Unfortunately, I had to learn this the hard way, and I think many of us in small business probably take ourselves to breaking point. And sort of about 5 or 6 years into my business, I was diagnosed with depression and battled that for about 2 years, to the point where I sort of thought just not being able to get out of bed in the morning was a result of too big a weekend. But it turned out to be that it was more than that, and it's a condition that I continue to manage today. But what that taught me is that if you don't look after yourself, you're no good to anyone. you're no good to your staff, you're no good to your family, and you're certainly no good to yourself. And I did a Churchill Fellowship to the United Nations in America, and I was in New York there, and a study that came out while I was there just really rang the alarm bells for me. And the headline was that 1 in 5 children already has a psychological disorder, and by 2020, mental illness will be one of the top 5 causes of death or disability in the young. So that's an alarm bell that should be ringing for us all. We need to take more time to connect with each other, to cooperate, to work together, to ask each other how we're doing. There was a survey recently of top 10 fears for kids in grade 5, 6. And number 1 on that list was death of parents, completely understandable. Number 2 on that list was climate change in the environment. Now, I don't know, draw your mind back to when you were 10, 11, 12 years old. Number 1 for me was werewolves. Number 2 was Doctor Who. So what we have to be really mindful of, and particularly in the business community, and this is why we have such a strong leadership role, is how we talk about the challenges we face is really, really important. We need to get back that business confidence in Australia. We need to talk about these challenges in how we can meet them instead of how they're going to overrun us. This network's really powerful. As an innovator in your business, in your community, working alone in your business, you can do amazing things, but a business breakfast like this, geez, I mean, if you can work cooperatively on any single issue, you can have an amazing impact on it. I want to leave you with a quote which I think is an important one when we talk about this sort of doom and gloom rhetoric. We should also remember that the future is not somewhere we're going, it's something we're creating. Every day we do things that make some futures more probable and others less likely. Thank you.
My business is I'm a manufacturing exporter, manufacturing the marine industry. The industry's gone down by 50% worldwide, and the dollar's made me 65% more expensive. It's as tough as I've ever known it. Give me a bit of gem that's going to help me feel good about the future.
I mean, even in 13 years of business, which is a relatively short time in the scheme of things, I've already seen the pendulum swing 3 or 4 times backwards and forwards. So one of my things that I did early on, when I actually nearly went bankrupt twice in the early years, so obviously there's some mistakes I was making there. But I then got myself a bit of a war chest for those bad times. So I've actually now got enough capital reserved away in locked up accounts for me to last for 2 years with no new contracts and to also pay out all my staff and pay myself a wage for 1.5 years. And so sometimes on a Monday morning I think about enacting that trust, but anyway. So it's planning for the good times, but also making sure you're ready for those tough times to get through. But then it's also looking at the ways that you can innovate in your business streams. You know, is there the potential to look at a whole new product that you can get out there that'll get you away from competing on commodity prices and dollar alone?
Thanks very much. They're good words, Aaron, but I think more than anything I'd like to meet one of Alec's angels. I think that'd be a really great idea. Okay, we now go to Alec Lynch, who has the graveyard shift. Yeah, you've got a couple of tough acts to follow. Alec Lynch is the founder and CEO of Design Crowd, which is an online marketplace for logo design, web design, and almost any other type of graphic design. It's like an online design contest, culminating in the best design for the best price. And he's been enjoying for a long time month-on-month growth rate of about 20%. I looked up Alec's profile, and I'll introduce him the way his profile does. So I'll ask you to please welcome a web entrepreneur, junior crowdsourcing guru, founder of Design Crowd, and parallel parking expert, Alec Lynch.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Alistair. I should take you everywhere I go. Appreciate that intro. So my name is Alec Lynch. I'm the founder and CEO of designcrowd.com, which is an internet business. And I'm really pleased to be here. I love coming to Melbourne in spring. It gives me an opportunity to wear my favourite winter jacket for an extra couple of weeks. When I got here, there was some confusion about seating. I was seated next to the Honourable Andrew Robb, and I realised halfway through breakfast that, or I concluded that I was eating Andrew's bacon and eggs. And I promptly stopped eating, and I eventually raised it with Andrew, and he was very gracious about it, and said, no, he was just happy with fruit. Well, apologies, Andrew. I owe you an Eggs Benedict. But I'm also very pleased to be here because I'm going to talk to you about three things that I'm very passionate about. The first is my business Design Crowd. The second is crowdsourcing, which is the business model that we operate with. And the third is entrepreneurship. And I'm going to share with you, I suppose, some what I see as nuggets of wisdom that I've collected from people that I've worked with in the last 5 years and from my experience in the last 5 years in operating Design Crowd. I'm going to start by giving you some background. Not sure what that is. No? Okay, that's not my presentation. There we go. So I'm going to start by giving you some background about my business. And the business is called Design Crowd. It's an online marketplace for creative services. We help small businesses outsource or crowdsource any creative service, anything from logo design to website design to PowerPoint presentation templates to t-shirt design. And we use a model called crowdsourcing, which involves harnessing a large group of people from around the world. And in our case, we've got a community of about 80,000 designers that come from Australia, everywhere from Los Angeles to London to Singapore and Sydney, which small businesses access through the site and for which the site provides an income to all those people. So I'll give you... Oh, this isn't working. Okay, I see what I'm doing. I'm holding it upside down, understand. Got it. So this is the textbook definition of crowdsourcing. The way I like to describe it, though, is that it's a form of outsourcing that involves connecting many brains together and many people together to get something done. So Wikipedia is a form of crowdsourcing that a lot of you would be familiar with. It's an encyclopedia written by the crowd, an amorphous group of people. And basically, you can think of crowdsourcing like cloud computing, but with people and brains. So computers can do certain things, and the more computers you connect together in the cloud, the online cloud, the more you can store, the faster you can process things. But computers can't do everything, and one of the things they can't do is they can't be creative. And that's where the value of crowdsourcing comes in, and it's one of the strengths of crowdsourcing is the creativity of the crowd. And that's the model that Design Crowd leverages. And it's a term that was coined in 2006. And it's a model that we're very passionate about. And we feel is quite important. We feel it fixes a number of problems with traditional creative industries. If you've ever used a traditional design firm, it's often slow, it's expensive, and it can be quite risky. There's a great uncertainty over what you'll get back. Crowdsourcing fixes those problems. To make it a little bit concrete for you, I'll give you some quick examples, then you'll understand how crowdsourcing works. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I started this business, where it's up to, and what I've learnt along the way. So this is a website in Australia, footytips.com.au. They posted a project on our website. They offered about $900 and they received 169 designs from scores of designers around the world. We even have design agencies and creative agencies that now use our service and outsource through our service. And this is an agency in Sydney called Radical Love. They received 100 different designs, another logo design project. We also have charities, some of the first bigger brands to turn to this sort of service. This is Amnesty International. They crowdsource, they do this annually now, they crowdsource t-shirt designs for fundraising. This is another charity. You can also use crowdsourcing to crowdsource web design. So we focus on creative services, but other things, anything creative can really be crowdsourced. Recently, NASA have been crowdsourcing ideas for what to do when they land on Mars on their next trip. I think the conclusion they came to was to play a Black Eyed Peas song, which was a little bit odd. But I'm from Sydney. The Sydney Opera House decades ago was actually designed through an international design contest, which is a form of crowdsourcing before the internet was available to facilitate it on a large, cost-effective scale for small business. It's another web design project. You can also use it for personal projects. So we had someone recently crowdsource graphics for their snowboard. So this is one of the bigger projects. This was Times Square last month. Timesquare.com offered $10,000 and received 5,762 different ideas from around the world. Now, if you compare crowdsourcing and the power of the crowd with going to a traditional agency, you can see why it's so popular and why it's now disrupting the traditional design industry. And I wanted to share this example with you because when I was starting the business back in 2007, when I first had the idea for the business, I was actually working in management consulting. I worked at a company called Booz & Co. And I was looking for business opportunities. I'd started a business when I left uni, and I was looking for a new opportunity. And I could see that the traditional design industry had a number of inherent serious problems. And those problems were part of the genesis of Design Crowd and the idea. And around that time, they released the London Olympics logo. And I don't know if you noticed it during the Olympics, they actually kind of there were a number of articles about how the Olympic Committee ended up hiding this logo. And when it was released, it got widely panned. It cost £400,000 to create. It took about 6 months to create. And there was a public backlash when it was released. And Iran, the president of Iran, had a crack at it. So you know you've got a problem when Ahmadinejad is criticising your logo. But for me, it's just one example. It's really summed up the problems in the traditional design industry, and in part that was the inspiration for the model. And I mentioned earlier that crowdsourcing addresses those problems. Well, crowdsourcing is fast. If you post something or you try and crowdsource something, you'll get first responses overnight. It's cheaper, so you decide, the client decides how much to pay, and ultimately it's risk-free. Someone in the world is going to have the right idea for your business and the right creative solution. And so it addresses the core problems that have been ailing the traditional design industry, and it's one of the reasons that the traditional design industry, which is, I could see, was $200 billion worldwide, $4 billion spent on web, logo, graphic design every year in Australia. So huge industry, but an industry that had stagnated, hadn't changed in decades other than software, and hadn't been growing. And if you compare crowdsourcing sites, and we're not the only one, but if you compare our services with the traditional design industry in the last 4 years, you can see how it's disrupting the industry. In Australia, there's 11,000 designers employed full-time at traditional design studios, and every year new designers graduate and can't find work. Well, on our website, we've now got 85,000 designers from around the world. So you can access more designers online through our service and many others than you can if you went to all the design agencies in Australia. So that's what Design Crowd does in a nutshell. And I'd like to talk a little bit further about how we've got to this point. Design Crowd, initially, I started it as an out-of-the-garage startup. I mentioned that I had a job in consulting. Well, when I had the idea for Design Crowd, I went to a friend from uni who I'd studied programming with at uni, and I offered Adam $3,000 to build a prototype for the website. And once that was finished, I had just finished a project in Brunei with Booz Allen. I got promoted at the end of that project, and then I went immediately into the partner's office and I resigned. And I moved back home. I was living in the city in Sydney. I moved back to the family home, took $10,000 in savings and 3 credit cards, and I launched the business. I used that $10,000 up in about 2 weeks. I think I probably thought maybe after 4 weeks Google would buy me. But it didn't happen. And I began to fund the business with credit cards. And I used those credit cards over about a 6-month period, and there's a certain point I was just working by myself from home, and we had our first large overseas client. It was a shoe company in the UK, High Tech, and they were crowdsourcing icons for their shoes. Gore-Tex, waterproof. It was about £1,000, a few different projects, and I remember I was on the phone on Skype and talking to this guy at like 6 p.m. from my mother's dining room table, and she would come across with a Milo. I'd go, quiet, Mum, quiet. And it was shortly after that we got some really good press, and from that, and a testimonial from this guy that said Design Crowd has saved us 50% on traditional agency costs. And I basically at that point I mentally really committed to the business, and I doubled down, and I took about 30 grand of loans from friends and family. And at that point, sort of, I was all chips were in. I was standing up at the table, and I continued to operate the business from home for another 6 months. But partway through that period, I was contacted by an entrepreneur in Switzerland who had used the service and really liked it, and he was an angel investor, and his name was Stefan, and he was interested in investing in the business, and he introduced me to this concept of angel investors. And he said to me, we had a call, and he said, "Alec, what would you do?" It could be Swiss or German, I don't know. "What would you do with $200,000? And I went away and I thought about that, and I realised, well, that's exactly what my business needs. It needs capital. We had competitors, or a million, either or. We needed capital, and I went away and I applied my consulting skill set. I did some business planning, refreshed the business plan, and then I began looking for angel investors, and I actually started looking locally, and I started doing Dragon's Den style pitches and putting proposals up online, and I found 7 interested angel investors. I was very lucky at the time to find them, and that was interesting because it was during the GFC, and it turns out people were looking for alternative investments. And I chose 4 and ended up in 2009 raising $300,000 of angel investment from these investors. And that really marked kind of the end of phase 1 of the business, which was me bootstrapping the business. And lots of challenges during that first period, so really taking on some debt. I had a motorbike accident, I broke my leg. So it was a really challenging period, and I'm quite proud that I stuck at it and got through that. And I learnt a lot, particularly in that first period. And that's definitely been the most challenging period of the last 5 years. The second phase of the business was what I refer to as the angel-backed phase. So with that money, we got our first office. Adam, who I went to uni with, joined as my technical co-founder. He's our CTO, and he handles all the geek stuff. We hired our first employee, and we grew the business about 11-fold in a 2-year period. Now, our first office was out in Western Sydney, and there was 3 of us out there. We used interns profusely. We had 6 interns from universities go through our business. And in the middle of last year, kind of went back to our current pool of investors who were functioning as our board, and with a new plan to raise more capital and grow the business internationally. We could see that Australia was our biggest source of sales, and yet it represented about 2% of the global design market. So we could see this huge opportunity, particularly in the US, in the UK and Canada, for us to grow our business. And last year, the board said, "Okay, Alec, why don't you go and talk to some new investors?" And so I flew over to Silicon Valley and then met with some investors over there, the sorts of businesses that have invested in Groupon and Facebook. And then I came back here and started talking to venture capital firms in Australia. And one of the first ones that I spoke to was based here in Melbourne, called Starfish Ventures. And flew down and pitched to Tony Glenning and John Dyson from Starfish, and was very lucky that they were interested in the business. About 3 weeks after that first pitch, I did a number of other pitches, and we signed a term sheet, and within 3 months they'd invested $3 million into the business. So that closed in October last year. So in that kind of was a watershed moment for the business, and also kind of marked the end of the second phase of the business where we had 3 staff. In the last 9 months, we've started applying that capital. We've grown from 3 people to 17 people. We've now got staff in 3 countries. We've got a much larger office in Sydney, and we've doubled the revenues of the business. We've acquired 2 US businesses, and I no longer live at home, which is nice. So I wanted to share with you, during, I guess, those 3 phases in the last 5 years, some nuggets of wisdom that people have shared with me, or that I've read about. Actually, this one is one of my favourites. I'd love to say it comes from one of my heroes, Steve Jobs, but it actually comes from Donald Trump. Still, I think it's a great quote, and I think too many Australian entrepreneurs, particularly tech entrepreneurs, when they start, they think about starting a business focused just on Australia. I would really encourage anyone thinking about starting an internet business to think globally. There's very little barriers to launching a global business online, and I think that absolutely, if you're going to think, you should think big, think worldwide, and take on an industry and try and disrupt that industry. During one of my pitches to one of the angels in the first round of fundraising, I met this guy. He was at the time he was a partner at Deloitte, a tax lawyer, and I thought this guy's going to love numbers. He's going to be in the detail. So I brought all the accounts, I brought all the numbers, and I was having coffee with him. About half an hour in, I said, "So here are the numbers," and he slid it aside, and he said, "I'm not interested in that." And I thought, well, what's going on here? He said, "Alec, I invest in people. I don't invest in just the idea. I'm not sure if your idea is even going to work." He said, "All I want to know," he said, "I'll invest $200,000 personally on a handshake right now. But I've got one question for you." He said, actually, before he said, "Alec, I invest in people." He said, "And I love your balls." And I thought, uh-oh, where's this going? He said, "I love that you quit your job, you've taken this huge risk." He said, "So I believe in you, but I just want to know one thing. If I invest that money on a handshake, are you going to work hard?" He said, "Look me in the eye and tell me you're going to work hard." And I did. And I looked him in the eye and I lied and I said, "Yeah, I'll work hard." No. But absolutely. And I actually asked a similar question to all staff before they join, because it's absolutely critical. It's really, really important. And I mean, I'm sure everyone that's sitting here today already does that, and that's why you're in the room. Another lesson which I found really valuable, particularly internet businesses and tech businesses lend themselves well to this, is that testing as you go and changing things and learning from that. And that can even mean if you've got an idea for an internet business, it's kind of like don't bet the house on it immediately. What you can actually do is buy a domain name for $10, set up a basic page that explains what the idea is about, and run $500 of Google ads so people click on the ad, go to the site, and just see how many people click through. And you can actually track that, and you can actually test most business ideas for under $1,000. There's an incubator in Sydney called Pollinizer, and it's launched a number of great startups, including Spreets, which was sold to Yahoo 7. It's one of the million daily deal sites around, but a very successful one. And one of the founders of Pollinizer has a great theory and talk on what he calls manual testing, which is a very rudimentary form of validating a business idea. And tech businesses really lend themselves well to this. And often we'll be in a team environment debating what's going to work well, and I'll have an opinion. No, the menu should say this, and someone else will say, no, the menu, that's crazy. The menu should say that. Neither of us really know. We're just testing hypotheses. And the only way to be certain, I end up saying, I'll just support whatever works. I'm not going to be precious about my idea. I can't know the truth. the data will tell the truth. And that's one of the beautiful things about internet and technology, particularly internet businesses and websites. Unlike software, you can just incrementally and test and improve in an ongoing fashion. This is a Winston Churchill quote, but I think it's just critical in business and in entrepreneurship to never give up. There's one saying that I found quite useful when you're faced with challenges, which is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And I've got a number of, I suppose, back pocket sayings like that I found quite motivational and quite useful, especially when your friends are out at night and you're sitting at home with your mum and Milo and a Skype. This is the last thing I'll share with you. It's the title of a book. It's not a naughty book. It's a book by Richard Branson on business. And I tell you, one thing that I've learned is that the need for speed in business and particularly in innovation is just paramount. And if you're sitting out there and you're sitting on a great business idea, and I have so many people now approach me and say, I've got this fantastic idea, I'd love to talk to you about it. And one of my first pieces of advice is you've just got to go and do it. Because there's billions of people in the world, and there's a great probability that someone else is sitting on the same idea as you. That's just the truth of it. So if you have a good idea, start today. And I'll leave you with that. That's the last nugget of wisdom that has come from a wiser person that I've found useful. And if you do start a new business and you need a new logo, you know where to go.
Thanks, Alec. That was inspirational. It was great to hear from the three guys. Winston Churchill, you mentioned one of his quotes. There's a slight development of one that you put up there that I like. One of my favourites of Winston Churchill's, and it was, when you're going through hell, don't stop. which I kind of enjoy. But and you'll remember this breakfast one day, Alec, as when Andrew Robb's Prime Minister. You remember that you sat down and you ate his breakfast. It'll be memorable just for that. Now we don't have time for questions, unfortunately, but I'm sure if you want to catch up with these guys, they'll be around for a few minutes afterwards. We got some pearls of wisdom from Aaron and from Alec, and I don't think Jan really had a go. So I'm just going to, while I just go to this next bit, I want you to think about a pearl of wisdom, message you'd like to leave the crowd with, something about success in business, just something special to take us out. All right, let's hear from Jan.
I think one thing that I really hang my hat on is thinking forward and reasoning back. So if you're looking at your business today, just like I'm in a fresh herb company, but we're thinking about where we're going to be in 20 years' time, and then reasoning back and starting to deliver a plan. And I think it was Aaron that said, make sure you're very involved with the macro events that are going on. So if you think big and you reason back, I think you're always going to be successful.
Oh, well done. Yep, thank you.